Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Director of the George W. Bush Institute, Holly Kuzmich.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Engage at the Bush Center presented by Highland Capital Management. Before we get started, a few notes about our format tonight. This is a hybrid event for us here at the Bush Center. We have some people in attendance. We're at about 20% capacity tonight, with masks required and social distancing and all the other health measures in place. But then we're also joined by hundreds and thousands of people by live stream. So welcome to everybody and thank you for watching. Thank you all for joining us. President Mrs. Bush, we're glad you could be with us tonight. Thank you to our board members and our Executive Advisory Council members for being here tonight. We offer special thanks to our friends at FlexJet for support of tonight's program. Tonight's program is the Highland Capital Lecture. It's a special night for our presenting sponsor. We're so grateful to Highland Capital Management for their endowment of our Engage series and for enabling us to bring newsmakers and big thinkers to the Bush Center. Our goal with the Engage series is to make the audience think about an issue in a new way, to advance conversations on important topics. And with Mark Cuban and Daymond John here tonight, we're all in for a real treat. Now to say a few words and introduce our headliners, please help me welcome to the stage the co-head of private equity and assistant general counsel for Highland Capital Management, J.P. Sevilla.
Thank you, Holly. Good evening. Mr. President, Mrs. Bush, thank you so much for hosting us. And thank you to the whole team here at the Bush Center for the hard work and planning that made it possible to not only gather safely here in person, but to also bring tonight's program to a much wider audience online. We're excited to welcome all of you, both those here in person and everyone attending virtually, to the third annual Highland Capital Lecture, part of the Engage series here at the Bush Center. When we launched this partnership, we came up with the idea of the Highland Capital Lecture as a way to devote one program in the Engage series each year to topics that affect the global economy. In the first year, we covered cryptocurrency and other disruptive technologies and what they mean for the future of our economy. And last year, we discussed the most urgent geopolitical challenges of the day. In each case, our speakers were experts in their fields who think deeply about these issues. But I know President Bush likes to say that he didn't want a think tank. He wanted a do tank, and if there's ever been a time for action, it is 2020. So we think you'll find the speakers for the 2020 Highland Capital Lecture to reflect that. Today, obviously, we face a global pandemic that has caused major disruptions in our lives and to the world economy. And so tonight, we'd like to explore the way forward for the world, for our economy, with a particular focus on the role of entrepreneurs, business leaders, and philanthropists. We're pleased to have Mark Cuban and Daymond John as our speakers, two individuals whose actions this year speak volumes for their leadership and character. The two have other claims to fame, though, like being primetime TV stars from the Emmy Award-winning show Shark Tank on ABC. Now, we all know Mark as the owner of our beloved Dallas Mavericks, but there is more to him than you may know. He is the best-selling author of How to Win at the Sport of Business. He holds multiple patents, including a virtual reality solution for vestibular-induced dizziness. And he is the executive producer on movies that have been nominated for 7 Academy Awards. Also, Mark is passionate about calling out unscrupulous business practices. He established ShareSleuth, a research and investigation website that seeks to uncover fraud in financial markets, and endowed the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Mark Cuban Chair to eliminate dumbass patents, an aptly named effort to fight patent trolls. Mark is also a philanthropist, empowering communities through the work of the Mark Cuban Foundation. One of the foundation's initiatives is hosting free introduction to AI boot camps for underserved high school students. Daymond John is an original member of the Shark Tank cast and the one affectionately referred to as the People's Shark. He initially made his mark as the entrepreneur and branding expert who founded the groundbreaking lifestyle brand FUBU, which has eclipsed more than $6 billion in global retail sales. Daymond is the New York Times bestseller of 5 books. His most recent, Power Shift, Transform Any Situation, Close Any Deal, and Achieve Any Outcome, was published this past March. In 2015, Daymond was named a presidential ambassador for global entrepreneurship and was part of an exclusive group that joined President Obama at the Global Entrepreneur Summit in Kenya. And in 2016, he accompanied President Obama on his historic trip to Cuba. One of Daymond's proudest accomplishments is his continued fight against dyslexia, an affliction he knows about firsthand. He has worked with the Yale Center for Dyslexia, and he currently sits on the advisory board of Understood.org. Our moderator this evening is Kevin Sullivan, former White House Communications Director under President Bush, and a senior advisor here at the Bush Center. Many thanks to our speakers for being here tonight, and thank you to everyone for your support of the Bush Center and the important work they're doing here in Dallas and around the world. Please join me in welcoming Mark, Daymond, and Sully to the Bush Center stage.
Thanks, JP. We really appreciate all that Highland Capital Management does for the Bush Center. And special shout out tonight, too, to our friends at FlexJet for their support in making tonight's program possible. We also have a special welcome tonight for some students that are here from Paul Quinn College and from the Tower Center at SMU. I'm sure they're all future entrepreneurs and innovators and newsmakers like Mark and Daymond. I'm actually subbing in tonight for Bush Center CEO Ken Hirsch, who recently had surgery and is recuperating at home. And I'm pretty sure Ken is watching the live stream. So we all want to wish Ken a speedy recovery. I'll do my best to live up to the high bar that Ken has set as a moderator here. But Mark, you know Ken, you think he's taking it easy?
No, I know he's not. Get better, Ken. And there's no way you're going to live up to that.
No chance. The Highland Capital Lecture, always a special part of our Engage series, as JP said. Tonight, as we look ahead to 2021, we're going to talk about the post-pandemic environment for business, along with our national movement to end systemic racism, with a special focus on the role that entrepreneurs, business leaders, innovators, and philanthropists can play on both of those important topics. But let's start on a little bit of a personal note. Daymond, we'll go to you first. Growing up in Hollis, Queens, 1992, you start FUBU, $40 in your pocket. Your mom's house gets mortgaged for $100,000 so you can start making product in the basement. Besides making money, what was your motivation back in 1992?
It was to be part of a community and be able to feel like I had a reason to belong. And honestly, a lot of where I grew up, a lot of rap artists are from. Right. And I didn't want to get kicked off the video set, so I just said, I'm dressing the rapper, so then they would kick everybody else off, and I had a reason to stay there.
So Run DMC, LL Cool J, Russell Simmons, lots of famous hip-hop and rap.
Salt and Pepper, Ja Rule, 50 Cent, so many people.
Did you think maybe you would go that direction and actually be an entertainer at any point?
No, but you know what, I think it does bring up a good point. At that time, crack had devastated the neighborhood, and the only people that we really had to look up to were the drug dealers, because we didn't see people of color on TV that were entrepreneurs. I mean, we saw Sanford and some, but it didn't look like he was doing that great. But we would see these kids who were doing something they loved, and they were making money, and they were inspiring people, rappers. And so we aspired. A lot of my friends ended up dead or in jail because they aspired to be the drug dealers, and I aspired to find a way to be part of that community. And marrying clothes and music was that outlet.
Now, Mark, we know your story, selling garbage bags door to door, going to stamp collecting shows. Mark, at the age of 15, was taking money off the grown-ups at these stamp shows. Who were your influences? What was driving you way back as a young teenage entrepreneur?
I mean, basically my parents, neither of my parents went to college, and when it came to business, they were like, we have no idea what you're doing. You're going to have to figure this whole thing out for yourself. And they just said, you know what, we'll support you. Go out there and give it a try. And I would tell my dad about all my different schemes, and his eyes would roll, and he'd shake his head. And he's like, you just got to try. I remember being 16 and going to stamp shows. My mom had got me into collecting stamps. And I would start at one booth and look for a stamp that I thought was undervalued, and then say, oh, this one looks like the more expensive one. Then I'd go to another booth and say, see, it's this more expensive stamp. And literally, I'd start with 50 cents and leave with $50. And I'm like, this is an inefficient market. I think I can make some money here. And that just taught me, you never know until you try. And up until the day my dad died a few years ago, he would just smile, shake his head, and say, you know what? From the time you were young, I taught you if you were going to get something, you got to earn it. And that's just always been my motivation.
Well, a good message then and a good message today with what we're facing now. Daymond, as I understand it, you ran out of money a couple of times in the early days. Did you ever think about giving up?
No, I didn't realize I didn't have financial intelligence. Listen, the school system, they don't teach you financial intelligence. They teach you shop. And I think financial intelligence entrepreneurship should be taught in schools, right? Because most likely, I'm not going to need to build a birdhouse when I get out of school. Right? I'm probably going to need to balance a checkbook, right? So I just kept trying, and I kept trying to educate myself. I'm dyslexic. It was very challenging for me in high school, but I realized that getting education doesn't necessarily have to be formal. You don't have to go to school. I mean, please, if you're going to go be a doctor and cut somebody open, please go to school. But I didn't have to go to school, and I kept learning and kept trying to find mentors to help me.
Right. Well, I'm glad it worked out that way, because we're all better for it. Now, Daymond, we think we know Mark Cuban here in Dallas, but as close as you are from all your years together on Shark Tank, what's something that the people tonight may not know about Mark?
Like he's really known, and he knows people in the hood. I took him up to Harlem one day, and at the Rutgers basketball tournament, and I was like, "You guys, look, it's Mark Cuban." They're like, "Yeah, he left his wallet in the bar down the block last night." I wasn't going to Harlem that much, so he's just you already know he's a beers and chips kind of guy. We have to wrestle him down in the green room to put on a suit, and that's what he is.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for being here tonight. Now, speaking of Shark Tank, Mark, when can you see Shark Tank?
You mean Shark Tank that's on Friday nights on ABC at 8 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. Central?
That's the one.
That Friday night ABC Shark Tank? What time is it, Daymond?
No, it's right after Thursday, right before Saturday. It's in that block right there. I think it's Friday.
Friday, right? Yeah, Friday nights on ABC?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that one.
That one. The 12th season of Shark Tank, which has won 5 Emmy Awards in the reality category. The 12th season premiered last Friday, which I'm sure you all know because you watched it. But what not everybody may know about the deal the show cut with the Venetian Hotel in Vegas to create a bubble for the show, built a studio with a socially distanced set. I think we have an image of it. That's what it looks like this year.
Yep.
Social distancing comes to the tank. So what was that like, being in your own bubble? We know about the NBA bubble.
Yeah, it was a lot stricter than the NBA bubble. I mean, much stricter. I mean, someone would knock on your door at 7:30 in the morning and, be all decked out and masked and everything, and we'd have to follow the arrows, take a specific elevator down, follow the arrows, change, and then go to hair and makeup. They'd be in hazmat suits, basically, do a hair and makeup. We'd go on the set, and the set was cool. I mean, it worked out really well. We'd finish up at 7 o'clock, go right back, and then just do the same thing. I mean, we didn't see sunlight for
weeks, 2 weeks, total filming, probably about 3 weeks. But
yeah.
You know what I think is incredible? Mark had the contacts to put the NBA together with the Venetian, but the producers being on the show and everybody, they have been watching entrepreneurship because they saw the pitches. And the pitches take an hour long. You see 10 a day. They, as entrepreneurs, learn to become creative and say, let's find a strategic partner that we wouldn't have been able to shoot this show. So I think that's a testament to what you learn from the show, from watching it, whether you're a shark or somebody at home, to say, let's get creative with the assets that we have.
And plus, there was so much at stake. And I think, to me, that was the most interesting thing, because production in Hollywood, all television production, no matter where, has basically shut down or had shut down. And so we were one of the first productions, definitely the first major production, that said, okay, we're going to go ahead and try to create a season. And it wasn't just about shooting the show. It was about the hundreds of people that worked behind the cameras, that did production, that were the editors. All those people, we all had to trust each other. that we all were going to do the right thing. And because when we took our route, I would go past these slats, and you could look through the slats, and we're in the Venetian Hotel, and there's people gambling and people whooping it up, and we had to make that left turn, and everybody else had the same temptations, but everybody trusted each other, and we got through all those days without any positive cases at all, and it set really the tone and an example for other productions to follow, so that there are now more productions being done.
Yeah. And with that point, there was 250 people, but one woman got a false positive.
Yeah.
She was driving down from LA to Vegas. Because she had that false positive and she worked on a voice and her husband worked on the voice, it trickled and it put 15 people who worked on other sets out of business just because that one false positive. So that's the sensitivity that you have to have when working
And how strict we were, too.
on sets like that.
I know you can't give away, Daymond, any secrets about what's coming up in future shows, like the one Friday night at 7 o'clock Central Time on ABC.
That's Channel 8 here in Dallas.
But every show will have at least some kind of COVID world, post-COVID pitches, products and services, right?
It will, because, as I've said plenty of times, this season, you couldn't come on and say, prior to COVID, I was doing bad. After COVID, I'm really bad. Now can you give me some money, right? It's just not probably investable. So everybody on there, they are pivoting, and it doesn't have to be COVID products,
right,
but they're pivoting in the COVID world. So Mark and I, we were just talking about it, we found it hard not to invest in certain people. Because remember, if we all invest in everything, then it becomes the deal tank. You don't want to watch it. You don't see the drama. Right? And Mark likes to buy everything like a drunken sailor already.
I did more deals this season than any other season. It was crazy.
The people were very, very impressive, and a lot of people at home are going to learn.
And also realized that they had to be quarantined as well. So if you watched the first episode at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock on ABC this past Friday, the father and son duo that were on there for the cuts, they were quarantined for 11 days.
All of them 11 days, and then the first thing they do is come down and see the sharks.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, to be that dedicated to your company, to be willing to do that, like Daymond said, it was hard to say no to a lot of these entrepreneurs. And then the stories of how they pivoted and adapted and were resilient were heartwarming and inspiring.
Now, I know there's, in the fine print at the end of the show, it says the sharks are investing their own money, but there'll be due diligence. About what percentage of the deals that you make ended up falling through?
Probably 30%.
Yeah. 30. Well, you got to remember, again, the casting agents we're getting better deal flow, because they were casting agents first. They weren't business people.
Right.
So year one and year two, somebody would say, well, I'm doing $30 million worth of business, and I have one employee, and the casting person didn't say, so where exactly are you selling
how does that
crap?
work? Yeah. How does
Right?
that work?
Yeah.
But after that, the deal started getting better, because the sharks knew what we liked, we were good at, we're learning too, and the people were better, the deal flow.
Yeah, you have a favorite all-time investment that you've made, or a pitch?
I do, because I'm the number one shark, because my company, Bombas Socks, is the number one shark in number one investment in Shark Tank history. So if you ever see any of the other underachievers that I shared the panel with, I want you to remind them, no matter how much money they have, that I have the number one invested product in Shark Tank history.
Now,
thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Mark always
They weren't clapping because they believed you.
True.
Mark always says how competitive he is and he hates to lose. So who's more competitive of the two of you?
Oh, me. Yeah, and you're definitely going to let me talk about my deal that's better than Bomba's.
Well, you're more competitive, but Daymond's got 2 New York Times bestsellers and 5 books, one of which, Power Shift, came out on March 10th, which you may remember was bad timing in terms of a book tour getting completely. So in addition to plugging Shark Tank, we want to plug Daymond's most recent book, Power Shift.
Thank you.
Which is a good book.
But
and Mark's in it. So
and Mark's in it, but Mark's book wasn't a New York Times bestseller. I noticed from JP's introduction. But
I know how many copies mine has sold. How many of yours sold?
And I can't keep count. They keep selling. I don't know. The numbers are moving as we're talking. I'm putting some.
All right, so
just like Bomba's, yeah, I know.
So what's your favorite? What's your favorite investment?
There's a company called Cycloramic that came on just as an app for the iPhone. That back in, this is like iPhone 5 days, when you could set it flat on the table and it would spin and create these panoramic videos. But then iPhones changed the physical format, and so we had to pivot. And they pivoted into this AI field called computer vision. Fast forward to 2 years ago, and we sold the company to Carvana the used car company, for about $22 million in stock. That wasn't the good news. The good news is the stock was about $18 then, and it's about $240 now, so
Okay. All right, I like that. But let me tell you another thing that I think we could all learn from the Bombers thing that I learned from. I didn't really want to invest in them because they were socks. I have 10 clothing
They're
companies.
from Dallas, too.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
Bombers?
Bombers was
No.
originally from Dallas.
Are they?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I don't know. I'm so busy reading the checks that come in. I didn't really look at this. But when they came on, I didn't want to buy another clothing company. I had 10 clothing companies, 8 were dead. But what they were selling direct to retail, and every time they sell a pair of socks, they give a pair away, obviously like Tom's shoes. And what I realized today, unlike in the past, I used to give at the end of the year, give whatever the case is, but the kids and the consumers, whoever they are, they want to say at the dinner table or wherever, I gave 50 times this year because every time I bought this, I helped clean up the ocean, or I helped take illegal guns off the street, or I helped buy, and that, in the reverse mentorship of having the Bombers deal has helped me a lot in my businesses.
And that's been a great trend, not to interrupt Kevin, but that's been a great trend on Shark Tank. You know, Gen Z and younger millennials that are coming on now all have a social component to their companies.
Right.
You know, kids are not going to buy from a brand that isn't socially conscious.
Yeah.
And whether it's Bombas giving away socks, I've got a company, Combat Flip-Flops, which is a bunch of Marine veterans that every time they sell any of their flip-flops, they donate money to build schools for Afghanistan because they'd served in Afghanistan, to build schools in Afghanistan for girls there. And across all the spectrum of, you know, our Riveter, who does handbags created by servicewomen, or the spouses of servicemen and women, that's just crushing it. They all have a social component these days, and it's just been a huge step forward. Because that, you know, you've got to be aware of what your consumers are doing, and young consumers today want, you know, they're all brands, and so they only want products that they can show on their Instagram that they're proud of. Right. And so whether it's Bombas or our Riveter or Combat Flip-Flop or Bottle Breach or whatever it is, it's becoming very typical now, and that's a good thing.
One last thing on Shark Tank. If you had to start a company with another shark, and you're broke, and all the sharks are broke, who do you pick to start the business with?
Daymond, because he's the king of the power of broke. We both know what it's like to have a business when you have nothing and there's only one direction you can go. And you've got to get out there and grind, you've got to get out there and sell, and you don't have to go out and raise money and this and that, you just go to work, and so it'd be Daymond.
What about you?
Yeah, it'd be Mark, because I think that, first of all, he knows how to package it enough and exit, as well as he knows all the things that I'm not really good at, technology
And vice versa, yeah.
and all those type of things. And I think that you want strategic partners that can add value to it.
All right, shifting to COVID. So
But by the way, my other choices were Kevin O'Leary, you know, Robert, Barbara. And
Yeah, right.
It's kind of by default as well.
Oh, thanks.
and people want to know, is Lori as nice in real life as she is on the show?
Well, you'll have to watch Friday night on ABC.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do it.
Yes, she is.
So personally, our lives have all been disrupted. What was your experience? How were your lives, personal lives, disrupted? What did you learn? What surprised you?
I mean, the first thing was during the Mavs game on March 11th when the season was postponed. I mean, it was stunning. I remember talking to the players, and Luka, I was talking to him in the locker room before they went out to warm up for the game. And Luka talked to his friends in Europe, and he was like, are we going to cancel the season? And I'm like, 5-10% chance. And I'm like, look, we'll know when we go out onto the court. If there's fans in the stands, the wisdom of the crowd will tell us this is not a big deal, right? Walk out into the court, packed. Every seat in American Airlines Center is taken. And then midway through the third quarter, you know, the NBA season was suspended. And so that obviously was the first shock, and dealing with that and trying to adapt, not so much for me personally, because I'm going to be fine no matter what, but recognizing that all the people who worked for us, right, what was going to happen with them, their families, just the safety of everybody too. How are we going to keep everybody safe? And so, you know, there was just so much that had to happen and that we had to think through, that, you know, the stress levels went up, but there was no time just to mess around. We had to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Daymond?
Well, I don't have a big organization on purpose, and I always look at people who can move, thousands of people in unison. It's always very impressive to me. I learned to just question myself about my why. I was on the road an average of 200, 250 days, and I've been able to stay home with my wife and my daughter, and I kept saying to myself, now, why was I on the road so much? And we moved out of New York, moving down to Miami and enjoying my life there. And also the other flip side is I just realized that, unfortunately, I'm one of the only people of color known on television besides that have nothing to do with politics, sports, or music. And with the civil unrest, a lot of people have obviously called me and to see the ways that we can address those issues. So I have another obligation to show people that no matter what color and gender and creed you are, you can be a person like me who didn't have a formal education and just applied yourself, and you don't need to be burning businesses, you should be building them.
So I suppose the central question tonight is, what is the role of entrepreneurs as we find our way forward as a country into 2021?
What makes this country different than every other country in the world is that we are a country of entrepreneurs. We are innovators, and when there's change, even when it's horrific like this, there is opportunity there. And it's the role of entrepreneurs to find ways to, the term is creative destruction, where you take things that have to be adapted and have to move forward and find ways to create new kinds of businesses. We're seeing businesses move towards more online. We're seeing more people work at home. We're seeing, people that are having to deal with healthcare issues with uncertainty, right? And so it's up to entrepreneurs to find solutions to those issues. And I'm 100% confident that when we're 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years out, and look back to the pandemic of 2020, we'll realize that there have been 10, 20, 50 world-class companies that were created here in this country by entrepreneurs. They may be 12-year-olds in Hollis, Queens. They're probably going to be the people that we all thought were crazy. Just like I'm sure people thought Daymond was crazy when he was getting started. They told me I was an idiot, when I was getting started. It's going to be the people that we don't expect to come up with new visions of what America 2.0 should look like, and we'll be proud of them, and they'll change the way we do things.
Where have you seen openings for opportunity? Like you saw with FUBU, I've heard you say Tommy Hilfiger and Ralph Lauren weren't making clothes for the people in your neighborhood, for the black community, and you found an opening and you went for it to great success. In the pandemic, where do you see those holes in the marketplace? I'm
seeing the same. It's like when we, 20, 30 years ago, there was only 4 channels, ABC, CBS, NBC, and public access, and now there's 3,000 channels, right? And I'm seeing that there are a lot of people who are carving out niches, in LGBTQ, in veterans, in people that age appropriate, and because of technology, it's making it easier. A year ago, you would have to spend 4 months traveling around to meet potential VCs or angel investors. Now you're meeting them all on Skype in one day or on Zoom in one day, and the data that you have, instead of me being only able to sell in New York, I could sell, if I had a smartphone, I could sell around the world. I can make FUBU the new version of Avon and let you be empowered by selling FUBU as well. So you're seeing all the underserved. There's somebody coming out with a solution for every one of those areas. So what happens to brick and mortar businesses, to restaurants? What's the solution for them, you think? Brick and mortar businesses should treat their businesses as one part and then the digital as the other. You're seeing Lululemon do extremely well, right? But people still want to go someplace. It needs to be an experience. All the people with fashion lines and these stores right there, I'm not sure, I don't know why they're not setting up little runways and having the most influential kids do their version of the fashion show on the runway, because it's something they can't get at home. But they need to know who their customer is, because we're also seeing on the flip side, the restaurants and other places where their customer who's been a customer for 20 years is down the block and they can't get a hold of them because they don't have their emails or anything else. So I think brick and mortar is kind of like, it's going to be a lost leader in some areas, but you're still going to be able to upsell customers or acquire new ones due to the brick and mortar. Mark, you mentioned America 2.0. What does that look like?
Different. I think to Daymond's point, we're not going to travel as much. Offices are not going to be the same. I think we'll see a lot of innovations in how commercial business space is enabled. I don't think we have to go to the office anymore, even though there's some companies that will prefer that. But I think, reducing or eliminating the travel time, not having to be on 35 or 635 or the tollway and spending 30, 45, 60 minutes each way to and from work. I think there's going to be value there, but that will force us to say, you know what, we still want that social component of how we work together. And I think you'll see organizations pop up, this as an example, where we'll get our companies together and bring our people together, every third week at this location, right, to socialize and get together, or every other week. So we'll adapt. We've seen a lot more people turn to technology for purchasing. My wife was adamant against buying groceries from Whole Foods and having it delivered. Not anymore. And I'll give you another example, and this alludes to what Daymond said with Zoom. I had a company, or have a company, called Alice's Table. And what Alice's Table did pre-pandemic was teach stay-at-home parents how to create businesses doing floral arrangements. So we'll teach you how to do a floral arrangement, and you can sell them in your neighborhood. And then they get another crew in, and they'd go to hotel rooms or hotel ballrooms and train 75, 100 people at a time. They switched to Zoom and started doing virtually, and now they can hit 1,000 people at a time and still charge $75. There's another group of chefs that started, instead of their restaurants went out of business, and in one case, and one got laid off. They started an online cooking show where they send the meals out in advance and charge $125 for the meal kits and show you how to cook it, once you get it, and get 1,000, 1,500 people paying the $100, $125 for the meal kits. So we're seeing an adaptation by entrepreneurs into new ways of doing business that I think are going to continue to be accepted. And then, there'll be, like I said earlier, that 12-year-old that comes up with an idea. And literally, to me, on Shark Tank as well, but anywhere, when I see an entrepreneur come on and present something, and I think to myself, why didn't I think of that, right? Those are always the best deal. And there's some 12-year-old kid somewhere coming up with an idea to do things in a way that we never would have envisioned, that is going to make us all think about, why didn't I think of that? And that, to me, is America 2.0.
And in this America 2.0, talk about the role of AI and robotics and technology in the greater economy.
Sure. At some point, we have to think about America, Inc. And America, Inc. has to compete globally. You can't just say we're not going to compete and we're just going to stick to our guns and just, deal with things domestically. We're going to have to compete. And if we really, in my opinion, if we really want to recapture manufacturing and be dominant globally in manufacturing, a role that China and Asia has pretty much taken control of, we are going to have to be the best at AI and robotics, period, end of story. And right now we're not. We don't have a cohesive national plan for robotics, for AI, for precision medicine. Right now, we're behind Japan and Germany and Korea for robots, and we're probably tied with with China. And we're the leader in AI, but China's catching up rapidly. And so we need to focus on enabling this country to invest in research as a country so that we can stay ahead. Because if we can advance our robotics, there's no reason why we can't take 50% or more of the products that are manufactured overseas now and bring them back. Are they going to be the same jobs as we used to have in the 90s in manufacturing? No. But are there going to be just as many jobs because the overall pie is bigger and you have to support, enable, fix, program for, et cetera, for these robots? Yeah. And I'll tell you the other thing that I've suggested is we should tax those robots. Right, I have a company, Hire Robotics, out of Kansas City, and they do welding, and they don't replace welders. These companies can't find enough welders. And there's no reason why, and typically these companies that rent from us or lease from us or buy from us pay on average $25 an hour. Charge them FICA, why not?
Robots.
Yeah, they're robots, charge them, charge them income tax, right? Or let's charge by the hour, $1 an hour, $2 an hour, They're not going to write to their congressman and complain, Now,
Daymond, you're the manufacturing expert, so you're going to have job displacement with Mark's vision of the future, perhaps. What do you tell young people about how to prepare for this workforce that is coming?
Well, you have to understand coding. You have to understand all these things. If the number one job for males in this country is operating heavy machinery and trucking, and autonomous vehicles are around the corner, what do you think they're going to do? Right? So you have to understand where this is going, and that's extremely important. You know, the thing is that they say that today, a kid graduating college will end up retiring, 50% will retire with a job title that doesn't actually exist yet. Think about it, your kid was going to school 20 years ago, 25 or 30 years ago, and they said, I'm going to be a drone operator or a social media expert. So you have to teach these kids this type of stuff, coding, like I said, financial intelligence. You know, when we move from the agricultural age into the industrial age, if you were a farmer and you looked at somebody and you were, you know, with your donkey, you know, plowing, and you looked at somebody with a tractor and you said, that's stupid. Well, there's two jackasses on the field now, right? So, you know, like, why aren't you, you have to understand where we're going, and we have to be implementing that at a very, very young age. Financial intelligence and coding, those things should be happening in the second grade, third grade, fourth grade, not when you're 17 years old, you don't have any financial intelligence, but you got a school loan for $300,000 for education you're not certain that you're gonna need for the new job that doesn't exist yet. So these are the things that have to be done at a very early age.
And my dad used to always say, you don't live in the world you were born into, you know, and that's not going to change. You know, the rate of change is only going to accelerate, and we've got to teach our kids how to learn, because that's the ultimate skill going forward, because it's impossible to know, like David was alluding to, you know, the jobs for the kids in, you know, for Mika is 5 years old, right? We don't know what jobs are going to be available for her and what she should be good at, and you're not going to know in 10 years. And even for kids in high school today, we don't know. And so we've got to teach our kids how to learn. And the reality is they learn differently than we used to. It used to, like with my son in particular, my 14-year-old daughter, trying to get them to read books is a battle. But I was talking one day, we're talking Shark Tank. My son came up to me when he was 10 and started asking me questions. He goes, Dad, on Shark Tank, I'm like, you don't watch Shark Tank? He goes, well, yeah, I do on YouTube. I watch highlights. Oh, okay. He goes, on Shark Tank, why don't you do royalty deals? And I'm like, you know what a royalty is? And he's like, yeah, when you get a percentage. I'm like, ugh. And he goes, and I said, well, I don't do them because it reduces your gross margins and for every product sold. And I'm like, do you know what gross margin is? And he's like, yeah, it's the difference between your cost and your revenue. I'm like, how do you know this? You know, and he's like, I just go on YouTube and I find these videos about business and I learn. And kids today learn dramatically differently than what we expected growing up. And so not only do we have to teach them how to learn, but we as their parents and teachers have to recognize that they're going to learn differently going forward.
You know, as part of the Bush Center, we also have a very high-octane policy center, the George W. Bush Institute, and the economic growth team. That's one of the areas that policy areas we work on. The economic growth team has flagged the decline over the last 20 years in new business formation, and we're actually falling behind a little bit in innovation. Why do you think that is, and what can we do about it?
No, that's a Mark question.
You know, I don't think we start as many personal service businesses as we used to. It used to be anybody could go out and be a plumber. Now you have to have 15 licenses. Right. You know, used to be you could go out and be a contractor that washes hair. In some states, you have to have hundreds, if not more, hours of experience washing hair. I mean, there's just so many inhibitors right now. I think that's part of it. But that's, you know, where you're going to get your volume is in personal service, personal contracting type companies. Right, the barber, the plumber, the electrician, and I think those have declined in their growth rates. Where you've seen an acceleration is in the tech world, because now, you know, when we started AudioNet and streaming back in the mid-90s, I had to buy all this hardware and it was super expensive. Now, anybody with a PC and a broadband connection and access to the cloud can start any type of technology business. So you're seeing an acceleration on the high-end, intellectual capital side in business formation, but all those personal businesses have just ground to a halt.
Another policy area that the team works on here is immigration reform. 2021 is going to be a big year for immigration reform here at the Bush Center.
Race reform?
Immigration reform.
Excuse me.
Yep. President Bush has a book coming out on March 2nd. This is shameless plug number 2, Mr. President. I'm trying to read your handwriting here. March 2nd, out of many one, the book comes out. There'll be a special exhibit here in the museum as soon as we can reopen. Of course, immigrants have a rich tradition in America of starting businesses. So what is the role of immigrants in formation of new business and in the growth of our economy more broadly?
I mean,
I don't know the numbers on immigration and the role of immigrants opening new businesses. So I don't want to talk over something that I'm.
yeah, no, it's huge.
I would think it's massive, but
Yeah, I mean, you look at the top tech companies, and almost all of them are immigrants. I mean, we're cutting off our nose to spite our face by not letting immigrants in. If you look at, kids coming over from the rest of the world, they're coming to our universities because they're the best universities, and we're not letting them stay. We want to be able to hire the best. And look, I believe in American innovation and American excellence, right? If we're not, we should compete. We can compete. I have no doubt that we can compete, and for some reason, we seem to be afraid to compete now, and you can't be the best unless you compete. And so I get the challenge that people might come over and work for less, and yes, that happens. I get the challenge of illegal immigration. That's not what this is about, right? This is about the best and brightest wanting to come to the greatest country in the world and contribute, and we won't let them, and that's a mistake.
That is for sure. What about the debate over antitrust enforcement? We've seen a lot of mergers. Yeah. Now I see the gleam in your eye. Prices in the U.S. now for everything, cable TV, Wi-Fi, cell phones, even airfare is greater than it is in Europe. That would suggest maybe a concentration there that has not been good for the economy. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I just tweeted about that today.
Any kind of monopoly that makes it harder for the everyday consumer, and you pass on that challenge to them, and it takes the competition out of the market, it's never going to be good, But
yeah, I'm not a fan of what the filing by the DOJ against Google.
Right.
I think what they basically said was because Google was better using artificial intelligence with the data they had, that it was an antitrust violation. And to me, that's wrong. And I think, I alluded to, I mentioned earlier that we don't invest enough in artificial intelligence, and that puts us at a competitive disadvantage globally. Well, you know who invests the most in this country? Google, Facebook, Netflix. Literally our best artificial intelligence talent, and possibly the best in the world, is concentrated in our biggest tech companies. And if we were to break them up, it would literally put us at globally a competitive advantage for this country, because they're the ones that have been doing AI the longest and do the best job of it. Better than the government, better than the foreign governments, better than foreign competitors. We literally dominate in that space because of those companies. And so we have to be really careful about what we ask for. Now, in terms of traditional antitrust, great. If somebody's using their market dominance to prevent competitors or to keep prices artificially high, nail them. I got no problem with that. But, just going after a big tech company because they're a big tech company without understanding exactly how it works, I think that's a problem.
And Google's probably the first of many, potentially.
I hope not. And look, that's not to say Facebook and how they deal with amplification of information isn't a problem, but you don't deal with that through antitrust. You can take away their Section 230 protections. There's a lot of different ways to deal with that. But antitrust is not the way to go, because when you break them up, it may actually be better for shareholders, but I think it hurts us globally from a competitive perspective.
Healthcare is another important one in honor of Ken's recent adventures with healthcare. I know you've written a lot about healthcare, Mark, going back a few years about taking insurance, diminishing the role that insurance plays. What do you think of that today, having gone through COVID, and how can we make great quality healthcare like Ken has received the last 2 weeks available to more people?
There's a couple things there, right? How do we provide it and how do we pay for it? Let's start with how we pay for it. When the healthcare replacement bill got voted down a few years ago by John McCain, I asked myself the question, if I were going to create a healthcare program to replace the ACA or complement it, what would I do? And the first thing I did was look at the largest companies in the country to see what they did. And it was the same thing as what we do with the Mavericks and my companies. We self-insure. 96% of companies with more than 5,000 employees self-insure. And so I just asked a simple question: why doesn't our country self-insure? And you could put together a program that's a public option underneath the ACA that basically you know, when you pay premiums into your insurance plan, or your company does, the only reason you pay premiums is to build up the bank for the insurance company, right? Because the insurance company wants to have enough capital so that when you get sick and need to have it paid for you, they have the capital in place. Well, if we self-insured, the Treasury can be the bank. So it's possible, and actually the RAND Corporation is doing a study for me on this as we speak. It's possible to have a healthcare system, a payer system that fits in within the ACA, where you don't have to pay premiums until you actually use the service. And so that's one thing. And then the other side, in terms of quality of care, you know, it goes back to innovation. All those things we talked about, we have to invest in innovation.
Daymond, one of the values of this place, which we got from President and Mrs. Bush, is to whom much is given, much will be required. What do you think the responsibility is of someone who's been as successful as you and Mark? What is the responsibility to give back?
You know, I think it's massive. I think that, you know, and we are some of the few that made it, and there's a lot who haven't made it. And all, you know, that's why we do Shark Tank. I think that everybody wants, at the end of the day, they just want to be able to feed their families and maybe change the world just a little bit better. And the information is, a lot of information is confusing out there. A lot of people are showing you generally their sizzle reel and not their blooper reel, and not giving you the step-by-step ways to execute things. Everybody's saying you need money to make money, got to do this, got to do that, instead of saying, no, I'm still failing even till today, right? I'm taking a lot of shots. I'm still educating myself and showing and giving people those examples, as well as from a resources standpoint. If you have it, I think you should be able to not only, you know, roll up your sleeves and jump in there, but, you know, give them the resources they need. So I think it's a huge responsibility.
Mark, on the night the NBA shut down, you were the first NBA governor that said we're going to make sure the game night workers get paid. With all the stuff that was swirling that night, how did that rise up to the very top of your, I mean, same night?
You know, it was something I had thought about earlier, you know, because like I said, we had talked to the players, and it was something that had been rumored could happen and circulated, and it was just, you know, you've got to take care of the people who work for you. You know, I'm a big believer in things work better bottom up. You know, when particularly now in the pandemic, everybody's afraid. And so if you can be authentic, honest, and communicate with the people that work for you and are talking to your customers and your partners and your vendors, et cetera, you're going to get the best results. And so, you know, they do the hard jobs, and I wanted to take care of them.
And thank you for doing that. 2020, of course, also the year that we all committed to do what we can to end systemic racism in this country. President Bush called it a staggering failure of what has still happened. Of course, the George Floyd killing elevated the conversation. The Jacob Blake shooting kind of turned it from listening to we better take action. I know there's a long way to go, and we're early days in this, but Daymond, are you encouraged at all about what's happening now, what companies are doing and brands are doing to try to take action to address this terrible problem?
I am. I've gotten countless of calls by people who say, we want to make a difference, but we don't want to do something that's not genuine. You know, we have more in common than we have apart. How do we do this, and how do we do this methodically? You know, and again, there's going to be different issues that are going to come around. It's going to be, like I've said before, people of color, women, LGBTQ, veterans, people that are not addressed. So you don't want to just go in one area. And what I find is the best way to address this, which I even did in my own company, is you talk internally at first and have those tough discussions with the entire staff. Mm-hmm. You know, and I did that when George Floyd happened, and I happen to be a person of color, and I didn't think that anybody in my company was racist, and they're not as far as I'm concerned. But I noticed that the whites didn't want to ask certain questions because they didn't want to insult somebody, sound ignorant, make an assumption, but the blacks had the same thing. That people of color didn't want to do the same. And then when you find two women that love each other in my company who sit next to each other for the last 3 years, and the woman of color says to the other woman, or said it in general, when my son starts driving at 16 years old, I don't know if he's going to ever come home at night because he may die at the hands of a bad cop. They go off on their own. They start having discussions, right, to see how they can make it better. And a guy who happens to be here tonight, he happens to be Jewish, he said something else. He said, I never realized this. I can cut my sideburns, change my last name, and realize how my accent is. And if I adjust those things, I'm no longer Jewish, but you're going to be black forever, no matter what, when you're walking down the block. And how do we address that? And what happens is when internally you do that in a company, and you start assigning, and many people in the company may already have organizations they're part of and various other things, you feel like they start to feel like they're part of the solution. And what do entrepreneurs do? They highlight they see a problem, they say nobody's solving it. They don't just jump in. They go, let me educate myself on why this problem exists, and let me see what I can do, an affordable step that I can do to then make it 2 steps, and 10 steps, and 20 steps. And when you have the entire internal company thinking like that, well, then when you have initiatives and things like that, everybody's on board. But if it just comes from AR or the CEO or HR or the CEO, then you get it fragmented. So the first thing is to start having internal discussions. And even when I was having that internal discussion, I realized that I had only sourced interns from reputable universities near my office. I wasn't even giving people of color as many chances in going to a community college and getting people like me. So out of 20 interns a year, I would have 2 of color. So I need to improve a little bit on my side as well. And when you start doing that, and you're very honest with your staff that you're not perfect, you're willing to learn, you're going to see a lot of great change, and I'm seeing it now. And it's going to take a long period of time, obviously.
And Mark, you tweeted earlier in the summer, white people, we got to fix this. This is on us. I mean, what kind of reaction did you get to that, and how do you?
It wasn't all pleasant. White people don't like to talk about race. I mean, Daymond, I'm guessing you've talked about race with your family.
Well, you know my stepdad. I mean,
Yeah.
My stepdad happens to be of the Jewish faith, so he taught me a couple of things.
You know what I'm saying.
Love doesn't come in a color or a gender. You better be pro-black, but never anti-anything else. And white people are just as crazy as black people. Don't worry about it. So you already know I've always been open to to this conversation.
Right. I mean, but most white people, white families don't talk about race around the dinner table. We don't have to have the same conversations, and until we understand that, it's going to be hard to change. Mm-hmm. It's not black people discriminating against black people. No one's perfect, and there's exceptions to every rule, but it's conversations we have to start to have. And until we do, we're, as white people, particularly when you hear the term white privilege, that immediately turns everybody off, right? I'm not privileged, and what we do is we create equivalencies. We manufacture equivalencies, right? Where we say, I can't be privileged because in my family or my family history, or don't you know, or my best friend is X, Y, or Z, right? So it's that we can't be racist, but that's not what it's about, right? It's about how are you becoming, like Daymond was talking about, more accepting? How are you realizing what your black or people of color or LGBTQ counterparts or friends or family are going through? Because until you can empathize and be compassionate with them, it's going to be hard to change. And until you can convey that compassion to other white people, it's not going to happen throughout all the different communities. And so it's not that white people want to be racist, no, right? But until you can, like Daymond talked about, talking to people and connecting with people, until you're able to connect with fellow white people to say, here's what I've learned. Here's what I've learned from Daymond John. Here's what I've learned from his family. Here's what I've learned from other, talking to, Mavs players, talking about the talk, right? Someone, one of the guys asked me, well, your daughter just learned to drive. Did you have a talk with him? I mean, and I was like, yeah, I told him to obey the police if you get pulled over. Just comply. Whatever they say, just say yes. They're like, no, not that one. Everybody has that talk. They're like, if you get pulled over by the police, you look for a lighted area, right? You don't ever let yourself get pulled over anywhere where it's dark. If you have somebody else in the car, you immediately ask them to start using their phone to tape it, to video it. If you can auto-dial somebody, if you don't have someone in the car, if you can auto-dial somebody so that they can listen to everything that's going on, you take these steps. These are not conversations that I have to have with my kids. And so until we have that empathy and understanding, it's going to be difficult to make the steps forward that we need to make.
But it just need to know that you you don't need to jump into it. You just need to know that there is more to learn. I'll just give you one quick example. I was on a sensitivity training conversation the other day with my staff and everybody, and the woman said, let me give you a question or a riddle, whatever the case is. A father and a son are driving down the street. The car flips over the highway, whatever the case is. Unfortunately, a truck hits them in ongoing traffic. The father dies. They rush the child to the hospital, and they take him up in the emergency room, and the surgeon comes out and says, I can't work on this child. This is my son. You know, and who do you think the surgeon is? It's the mother. I have 3 little girls. I have a great ex-wife. I was raised by a single mother, and I have an amazing wife. I was stumped, and I am one of the biggest women advocates you will ever meet in your life, and I was stumped, and I was embarrassed. And I said that to my staff. I said, why was I stumped? I need to educate myself and think more and be more sensitive just to that matter. You know what I mean? So everybody should be open to just listening.
You know, you mentioned hiring interns, but you've been at the forefront of creating opportunity for disenfranchised populations for a long time. You have an incredible deal with Lowe's to help, you know, minority-owned businesses of all kinds get their products in with Lowe's. And on Saturday, this is another thing people could look for. You've got the first ever global summit for black entrepreneurs. You got Jamie Foxx and Gabrielle Union and BET founder Bob Johnson. So where is the intersection between that kind of opportunity that you're creating and this social justice conversation?
I think it's a talking point because you'll have those conversations being discussed, and you'll have people like, you know, Chase and Pepsi and those people wanting to be on the marquee to say this is what we stand for. You'll also have people like Pepsi and FedEx saying, if you're not going to change the name of this team, I'm not going to support you. And they're saying, and you're having other people go, you know what? It's the right thing to do. And when you start having at least that, you hit the bottom line, somebody's bottom line like that, there will be change. Unfortunately, if you're not going to get it because somebody thinks it's the right thing to do, then go off of their greed. You will no longer be able to profit off the people that you serve because you don't want to trust or respect or value them. And unfortunately, that's a couple of ways it's going to happen.
Mark, you participated in Black Lives Matter rallies alongside your players, but you also have supported the families of the 2 LA County deputy sheriffs sheriff's deputies who were ambushed. How did you come to that decision? You know, in other words, supporting Black Lives Matter and supporting law enforcement?
Yeah, there's no conflict there whatsoever. You know, Black Lives Matters is about ending racism, and it's also about, you know, improving policing, reforming policing. But that doesn't mean I don't support every single officer that puts on the shield and goes out there and tries to protect us. Absolutely. It doesn't mean, I mean, in every organization there's challenges, but, you know, I've got a group, a fund, the Fallen Patriot Fund, that's all it does, is we provide financial support to first line providers, police officers, soldiers that are that have economic hardship. And yeah, there's no contradiction there whatsoever. I mean, we don't get to have fun and play basketball and come to these events unless people put their lives on the line for us.
As a person of color, I really am not certain about the funding of the police. That's a hard job, and that is not a fun job. So, you know, we may be able to point at as we say, a couple of bad apples, and I get it. You need training for these people out there, but
and the Mavericks are doing that.
Yeah, look,
we need these people. There's no combination.
That doesn't mean there aren't a lot of problems in police forces. I mean, I've sat and talked to the chief of police for multiple cities, and the first thing I asked them is like, you know which ones are the knuckleheads, right?
Yeah.
And they're all, yeah, we know which ones are the knuckleheads. I'm like, well, why don't you get rid of them? I'm like, and they give you 5 reasons why they can't. And then you look at their budgets and you say, well, why, you know, you're spending money, like we hired the former chief of police, David Brown, to come work for the Mavericks after he left the city of Dallas. And we put together all these programs with kids to try to connect officers and kids. And we would talk, and it's just like, why is the police force spending money for these types of programs when there's also charities doing it, there's schools doing it, the city's doing it, the county's doing it. There's all these different organizations that hospitals are doing it that are spending money on the same things and replicating each other. Why can't we adapt and have all these groups work together?
So we need an entrepreneur to create technology to say,
Just make it all work together, yeah.
Check if a sexual offender moves to your neighbor, you know who it is, right? That guy who killed George Floyd, he had 17 different reports or whatever. I can't spill coffee on somebody at Starbucks 17 times and keep my job, right? So if we have some kind, maybe it's a technology that we need to see and let the community, say, what's going on? This is a bad apple.
So there's a lot of changes that need to happen, but you have to ask those first questions.
Driven by entrepreneurs.
Yeah, driven by entrepreneurs, and it doesn't mean you don't support the police. It just means there's always room for improvement, and you have to ask the hard questions.
Well, let's close on an optimistic note. Optimism is the centerpiece of the leadership programs here at the Bush Center. That combination of values and principles that support an optimistic vision for a better tomorrow. And you both have embodied that in your leadership careers. President Bush has talked about this a lot. Everybody, we'll start with you, Daymond. Everybody who goes on Shark Tank is optimistic. They're excited, they've got an idea, they have confidence, they've prepped, they're fired up, yet most of them get turned down. And most entrepreneurs' businesses don't make it. Why do you think that American spirit flourishes so deeply in this country when the failure rate is so high, and especially in a year like this where there's been so much heartache and hardship and sadness and tragedy?
Because we're allowed to fail. Because this is a country that doesn't penalize you for asking a question. When you're in school, you want to ask a question, why, miss this and that, why? And I remember I said to my mother one time, and because I'm dyslexic, I may have heard things wrong. And I said, she said, do you know what went on today in school? I said, no, because I didn't want to ask a question. She was like, why? You can ask questions. And I was like, well, no, because it's the teacher. She said, this is the greatest country ever. You can ask any question you want as long as it's with respect. And she said, why didn't you ask a question? I don't know. Do you know? And I said, I didn't want to feel dumb. She said, well, do you know the answer? I said, no. She said, well, guess what? You a dumb MF right now. That's what she said. And I realized that I have to question anything and everything. But listen, at the end of the day, this is the greatest country in the world. And we are at a time that we can talk about all the bad things, but here's the good things right now. You have a large workforce of people who want to maybe work on their own dream instead of working on somebody else's, right? You have a Rolodex of people that 8 months ago you would have called and they were on the train, plane, automobile, they didn't have time, but right now they're home fighting over the remote control with their significant other, eating Cheetos and drinking Tito's, and they're looking at, what am I going to do, right? So this is a great time. And you know what, you got to pass right now, because if you go over to anybody and say, I'm in a bad place, or this is what happened during COVID. Everybody had to adjust during COVID. You can't look at somebody and say, you were doing so great, and I hate to tell you what's going on with me, right? I think those are the opportunities that people should take advantage of. Checking into their Rolodexes and calling people, being a little humble, but taking as many swings and chances as they can right now.
Mark, we'll give you the last word. Why should people be optimistic?
This is the greatest country in the world, and we all have the opportunity to be great. It's not easy. Not everybody has the same platform. Not everybody has, the easiest path. But we all can find something that we love to do and at least try to be great at it. It may be the best barber in your neighborhood. It may be the best electrician in the city. It may be the best coder. It may be whatever it is. You don't have to know what you're going to be when you grow up, but you get a chance to try any number of different things. And when you find something you like to do, you have a chance to be great at it. It could be painting, it could be anything. And that's what makes this country great.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Cuban and Daymond John, thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, you get the standing ovation.
Oh, wow.
Just a few.
They just want to stand up and stretch.
By the president, that's absolutely
Just
amazing.
a couple of housekeeping notes. If you want to hear more from Mark and Daymond, subscribe to the Strategist podcast. I recorded in addition the premiere of season 4 a little bit ago. It's hilarious, a lot of good stories. Don't forget to watch Shark Tank Friday night at 7 o'clock on Channel 8.
When was that?
7 o'clock Friday on Channel 8. Go to barnesandnoble.com and place your order early for Out of Many One by George W. Bush. Next program is the Laura Bush Book Club on November 18th with an incredible author, Dr. Michelle Harper. The book is called The Beauty in Breaking It. It's an extraordinary memoir of an ER doctor. You got to read this and attend our event. And in the interest of everyone's well-being, we're going to dismiss from the back And we have some staff ushers who will guide you out. So the back rows will go out first to keep everybody healthy and safe. And thank you so much for coming. Thanks to Highland Capital. Thanks to FlexJet.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.